All right, and we are live with another book discussion for this week. Once a week, usually on Fridays, but I'll be traveling tomorrow, so doing it today. But usually on Fridays, we'll be discussing a leadership book. And it might be something you've read before. A lot of these I have read before. Most of them I have. But it is interesting to go back to a book and find new things as you're at new points in your career. And that's what we've got today. Today we are talking about Who Moved My Cheese. And as I mentioned in the introduction to this video, or the text to this video up above, this is the first book I was ever assigned by a boss to read, and it is without a doubt my most gifted book. Almost all of the supervisors that I had over the last 10 years of my career back when I was in management, I had read this book because it is about change management. But it isn't a textbook per se in regards to change management. It is much more personal than that. So there are not a ton of how to do change as a leader. Doing great, Deep, and Cassie, so good to see you here. It's not a lot of how to, it's how to deal with it on a personal level. And what it does is when you have an entire team read this book, you create kind of a common discussion thread throughout. Jonathan, good to see you here. A common discussion thread throughout your work where you can start referencing things and start coaching each other through change. Now, this is a Spencer Johnson book, 1 Minute Manager, Peaks and Valleys, and so it is done in kind of an allegorical way. So it is just a simple story that is told. But as with all of his works, it is very rich in what you can actually pick up through this book. And again, I picked up a bunch of things I hadn't picked up before. I've probably read this book, I would say at least 7 or 8 times before this. It takes very thin. It takes all of an hour and a half to read. If even that, I read probably about average, and it takes me about an hour and a half to get through it. So some really great stuff, and I just want to dive right into it right away. If you haven't picked up the book, I really encourage you to do it. It's going to help you personally and professionally deal with change. Jackie, Bridget, so good to see you here. I'm actually going to start off with a couple of things that I noted in the back of the book and kind of the epilogue to this story. So how this story is structured is a bunch of old classmates get together and start kind of discussing life just a little bit, and one of them references a story that they heard. It is the Who Moved My Cheese story. And so he goes through and tells the story for the rest of the team. Clarissa, good to see you here. And then they kind of discuss it afterwards, and it's in the afterward that I actually got a couple of real key quotes to it, and then I'll kind of dive into the story. The first thing that I'd like to mention that I called out, oopsie, as I'm looking for it here, there we are, is that a change imposed is a change opposed. I'm going to say that again. A change imposed on others is a change that is going to be opposed by others. And good to see you here, Steve. Deep, I'll get to that question here in a little bit. So if you are looking, and this goes along with all the research. So the first research that was ever done on change management was done back in the 40s in a linen manufacturer in Virginia. A couple of Harvard professors went in there. And to kind of summarize the findings, what was happening was they were imposing change. It was very typical. Hey, here's what we're doing. Here's how it's going to lay out. Any questions? That's imposing a change. But what they found was that really created animosity in the work group, that led to poor results, and it led to turnover even in some cases. Elena, so good to see you here. Good to see you catching up again. And yes, love that book. But what happened was when they actually brought people into the change, so they're not imposing a change on people, they are bringing them into the process. The more they were able to bring people into the process, the easier it was to put the change into effect, and the better the results were that they actually received. So it was a little call out that I'd never noticed in any of my other readings of this book, and that is that a change that is imposed is a change that is opposed. So don't just tell people what you're going to do. Bring them into the process. If you know you have to do a particular thing, bring them into the planning process of implementing it. That way you are not imposing a change upon somebody that's going to lead to them opposing it as well. Patty, good to see you here. I know who are always often talks something ill, but how do I say positive? Deep, I'm going to handle more of the general questions in the next episode of Mentor Minutes. I will take that and I will get it on the beginning of Mentor Minutes. I do want to keep this just discussing the book Who Moved My Cheese and going through it like that. Now, the story itself is centered around a group of two mice and two what's little people is what it's called. So the two mice are Sniff and Scurry. And so Sniff is really good at sniffing out changes that are taking place. And Scurry is always quick to be taking action and quick to be scurrying along. Those are the two mice. Now, along with this story, and it is a silly story, and so you'll hear me talking about cheese and everything else on here, and it is a little cheesy. Sorry, couldn't help it. But that's the way that simple story is told, and it helps break down that. I know that was done intentionally by Spencer Johnson. You have a silly story, and it is something that breaks down some of those walls and some of those imposing factors that are on you. So the story, two mice, Sniff and Scurry, and then there are two little people. So they're about mice-sized, and this all takes place in a maze, hence why the people are mice-sized. And the two little people are Hem and Haw. And so Hem is resistant to any change going on, anything that's going to change how things are working, and is always the person that's most, most reluctant to change. Haw is the one that does a lot of learning over the course of this study, and is really who you really want to emulate as far as the story is concerned. And so it takes place in a maze. Everybody's looking for cheese. Sniff, Scurry, Hem, and Haw. And one of the last things I'll mention before I kind of start getting into it just a little bit, and that is, they mention in the epilogue as well, that everybody on your team has all four of these individuals. If you've got 10, 11, 12 people in your department, you have got all four characters of this particular book in your department. You have a Sniff. You have somebody that's constantly measuring what's going on. Maybe they're actually the one that is the biggest gossiper in the group, but they're always measuring what's going on, always seeing where things are changing, always keeping their finger on the pulse of what's going on. That's the Sniff of the group. Then you have the Scurry. You have the people that just want to, tell me where to go and I'm going to go. They're looking for the action. They're looking to move as quickly as possible. And then you'll also have those people, those Hems. Those are the ones that are resistant to change, aren't looking to make any moves, want the world to come to them, quite frankly. And they're the ones, they're the biggest resistors. And it's the big question mark in this story is whether you can get that Hem to come along or whether that's somebody who is going to need to get left behind, unfortunately. And then you also have those people that are willing to learn. If you set the vision, you replace what they had in the past with what they could have in the future, and moving them towards that and getting them used to the behaviors that will be healthy for them to work through. A change in modes. Often CEOs, Cassie has a comment here, and if you have comments about the book or about change in general, I'll just kind of take those as I catch a kind of a break in the story to go through here. CEOs make massive changes without advising frontline staff or even their own leadership. So how can we help when that happens, regarding my last comment? Great comment, and that's one of the biggest problems that takes place. And I have a bunch of coaching clients actually that are dealing with similar things where there's changes that are being imposed. And what often happens in those cases, what can happen, Cassie, is they'll actually ask for feedback, but it is a completely useless exercise because they're not interested in actually looking at the feedback at all. What you want to do in those cases, when you have a change that comes down on high, what you want to do is you want to try to bring the team in as much as possible, all right? So you're not imposing the change on, you might be imposing the change on them, but you're giving them some control over the process of implementing it, of rolling it out to the team. So if you can give them any ownership stake, any say in what's going on, that is going to help you. Now, ideally, the CEO would have formed some sort of committee, asked for volunteers, looking to solve the problem, looking to come up with a plan, that sort of thing. But that's just not the way that it tends to work in organizations, sadly. But give them whatever chance you can to bring them into the process. Things change and they are never the same. Life moves on, and so should we. So true. And that's just it. That's one of the big lessons. So the story starts out describing an instance where these two mice and these two little people are in a maze and they're constantly looking for cheese. They spend their days looking for that cheese, and they find eventually this huge stash of cheese. All right? And it's in Cheese Station C is what it's named. Now, cheese, for your purposes, can be anything that you find important. For many of us, that is money, that is security, that is family. that is, accolades, that sort of thing. Anything that is important to you is your cheese as far as this story is concerned. And it's something that you are constantly striving for, but oftentimes we find ourselves in a position where we get a bunch of it. We have a bunch of it. And so we get in a little bit of a routine. And so what happens is, let's see. So what happens eventually is this cheese starts dwindling down. Now Sniff and Scurry, the two mice, they keep things simple. They're animals. And so they notice that the cheese is going away. Sniff notices that the cheese is going away, and as soon as it's gone, Scurry is out the door. So the two mice, as soon as they come in and find that the cheese is eventually all gone away, bam, they are out the door and they are back looking for more cheese. All right, that is a thing that we can emulate. Taking the emotion out of it. One of the things that's highlighted in this book is, humans have all of these emotions, all of these things going on in their head. And what happens is we tend to complicate things more than we need to. Don't get me wrong, that intelligence serves us in a number of instances, but many times we get caught in our own head. We get emotional attachment to certain things. And so in this case, Hem and Haw became complacent. They had the cheese. Whatever that is, for you, like I say, could be money, security, family, whatever it is. That was all going really well. And so they got complacent. They stopped looking for more of it because they had plenty of it. And what happens when you get complacent is you also don't tend to look to see if whatever it is decreasing, losing its importance, falling by the wayside. Is your career stagnating and slowing down? Is the industry slowing down? Is the company slowing down and going on a downward track? One of the lessons is to look at this and learn to look at what might be changing so you don't get surprised by the change. All right. Now, some of the highlights that come in here, and again, that's one of the reasons you go through the book so quickly, is they highlight on full pages here. And I'll just kind of use those as markers to go through this. The more important your cheese is to you, the more you want to hold on to it. And that's, that gets into the big changes that you're going to have. Your job. The more important your job is to you, the more difficult it is to leave it for even a great opportunity that might be out there, because you're happy there. It's where you find your identity. You've been in it for a number of years. You have security in that particular position. And to make a change from that is difficult, and time is one of those things that increases the importance. If you have been working with the same system for 5, 6, 7 years, when you eventually change out the system, as you know you must, as time goes on, you're going to have to change systems, it becomes really difficult. And so the more you want to hold on to it, and the more resistant that you're going to be. And so that's one of the first lessons is, whatever it is that's important to you, the more important it is, the more you're likely to want to hold on to it and want there to be no changes at all. Now, human beings are wired to resist change. Change in the mind, neuroscientists have looked at this, change represents uncertainty. And uncertainty represents risk. And we are naturally going to be risk averse. That's a survival mechanism that we have wired into our brains. And so that security that you have from something that you've had for a long time and that's more important to you is going to cause that resistance to shoot up. Now, the application for you in this as a leader that's going to be managing changes, the more important something is, the more central it is, and this isn't a newsflash to you at all, the more resistance that you're going to face from the team. It may be an obvious change. Like I say, why would you expect a software system to last for 5, 6, 7 years? Heck, why would you expect it to last for 3 or 4 without being a dramatic change? It's obvious. However, it's important to others, and that's where you're going to find some more resistance in it. One of the first things to address in this is that fear of uncertainty. And the comment in here is, what would you do if you weren't afraid? Now, the little people are stuck in Cheese Station C. They go back to it every day, and there's no cheese there. They're just hoping that things change. Meanwhile, Sniff and Scurry are already off in the maze looking for more cheese, finding cheese along the way, etc., etc. The two little people are stuck in a rut. They don't want things to change. They then move into the hope stage of things, where I hope that it will just magically get fixed. And that's where so many of us are. The reality is that things don't change until we change. And you have to be taking actions to control where things are going and where things and how you're going to be dealing with the change. Otherwise, you're just kind of floating down a river without any paddles or anything. At least with a paddle, you can kind of direct where you're going. You have to be willing to take those actions. The big problem with actions and why people don't take the actions, why they don't see the writing on the wall, another pun from this particular book, but one of the reasons they don't see the writing on the wall is they're hoping things change because they don't want to take that action because there's that fear of failure, fear of the unknown. This is highlighted in the book. The little people didn't want to go out in the maze because they're afraid that they're going to get lost. They're afraid that they're going to spend all of this time running around day after day and not actually find any more cheese or anything that is better. And so that's the fear that sets in that prevents them from taking that action. So you have to address that fear in a couple of different ways. And I'll kind of skip ahead. One of the ways they talk about, and he talks about this a few times, and it's something I really hit upon, and that is creating that mental picture of what it is going to be like. And so painting what the goal of whatever change you're looking to institute or whatever change you're going through, really spend some time painting the picture of what that's going to look like when it's in place. Really paint the picture and try to make it as accurate as possible. Paint the picture of what it's going to look like along the way through that change. That's the importance of a detailed plan and exposing that plan and letting your team know about that plan ahead of time. Paint that picture and it creates a little bit of motivation and it reduces that fear that people are feeling. All right. So yes, we're going to go through this change, but this is what it's going to look like. It's going to be like surfing Amazon or something, whatever that system is that you're changing, for instance. And I'll keep coming back to that because that's a common one that people deal with is, what is that going to look like? What's your day going to look like? How is it going to benefit you? Where are some of the struggles? Be honest and upfront with those struggles so people aren't surprised by it. But paint that picture and that creates that pull for them to get going. Now, there's a quick lesson to be learned in getting in touch with that reality, and that is that you want to smell the cheese often so you know that when it's getting old. It's making sure that you are keeping people apprised, keeping yourself apprised of when changes are afoot. Your competitors are looking, your organization's competitors are looking to put you out of business, for lack of a better term. How are they going to change? What new things are they going to do that are going to do an end around? This is that whole paranoia thing that CEOs, where they're always looking over their shoulder. It's at the next big thing that's going to put them out of business, shall we say. They do that to be anticipating the change so that they can react to it quicker. Because the quicker you react to it, the less of an impact that change is going to have on you in the first place. Now, once you get moving, you have that fear of action, all right? And you get over that and you start moving in that new direction. That's what helps you find the solution. When you move beyond fear, you move toward that next good thing, and you also feel free. You feel more in control. You're not being held back by your fears. That gets hit upon and talked about in the book quite a bit, is that you have those fears holding you back, and you know that you need to be going out and doing something. So when you start going through the change and getting towards those goals, it becomes empowering for you. And logically, that's from an emotional standpoint, and then logically you know that that's what's going to make you better. Now, one of the things that isn't hit on this, but I do like to highlight on this, is that change, progress, everything is not a smooth arc straight up. It looks like this. All right, you're going to have, to get to another book we reviewed about 5 weeks ago, and that is Peaks and Valleys. You're going to have those 2 steps forward, 1 step back moments. All right, but the key is that you keep working through that. You're going to have disappointment in the maze. Ha is the one that is the little person that goes out, finds lots of disappointment in the maze, but keeps moving towards that goal of eventually getting to a place where he's going to find brand new cheese, brand new things that are important to him, things that are more important to him than what he dealt with before. The quicker you let go, and so you're talking about, looking for those changes, keeping your finger on the pulse of what's going on, tapping into the character in the book, sniffing around for where the changes need to take place, where things are slacking off. Because the quicker that you let go of the old cheese, the sooner that you find the new cheese, the better thing that's coming around. That's what you want to be looking for. What is the better way of doing particular processes? So everybody that's out there, look at your processes, look at your organization, look at your department. What hasn't been changed in 5, 6, 10 years? What processes haven't been looked at? Those are great places to go in and take a look and say, what can we do better? All right, that's your old cheese. All right, there might be new ways of doing things that technology has brought on, that people have brought on. It isn't just that there's technological improvements in your organization, there are people improvements in your organization that you can look to leverage and take advantage of to move things forward and change. So the quicker you let go of that old cheese, the sooner you find the new cheese. Now, getting back to those logical, and this one kind of bridges the gap a bit between logic and illogic, and that is it safer to search in the maze than to remain in a cheeseless situation? We've seen this before. You have friends, maybe you've done it before as well, where you stayed on board or saw somebody stay on board a sinking ship. They didn't want to make a change. And so what happened was they went down with the ship. The industry cratered. The organization went out of business. Whatever that happens to be, they didn't make the change. And so what happened is they were forced into a change. And so logically, your question is do I stay in a situation where I'm going to get left behind? Where the competitor is going to get the system, the processes, the products in place that are going to put me out of business? Or do I need to is it better to expend the effort and try to make those changes myself, try to stay ahead of that? Putting that effort in now or going down with the ship. That's your logic and emotion kind of brought together. Is it safer to search in the maze, using the allegory here in the book, than to remain in a cheeseless situation? You might say it's safer to stay where you're at and just hope that things turn better. But hope, as many people have said, is not a strategy. You have to be out there and looking. And so this kind of gives you that encouragement. And again, this is a book that I recommend. It isn't just, it's you learning how to change personally through this book, really. It's not something that directs you in how to deal with team members. But what you can do is give them this book to actually read. So pass out copies of the book. Have a discussion with them. Set aside an hour and a half in the middle of the day for them to read this book. You create the discussion and people recognize what's going on. A simple story tells a simple but somewhat complex lesson for everybody in how to deal with things. Those old beliefs don't lead to new cheese. And those old beliefs, what they're referencing here is our human nature. When I talked about those neuroscientists who've studied and say that people are naturally resistant to change, that's an old belief that you need to get past. All right, getting past that is what's going to get you progressing and moving on to new horizons and new cheese in this particular case. But that's what gives you the best chance of in the future improving your situation or even making it stay the same. If you don't take any action or any changes in regards to something, everything naturally decays. So you have to be reinvesting in it. That's what moves you into a position of plenty, abundance, and real overall fulfillment and satisfaction with what you do. So when you see that you can find and enjoy new cheese, you change course. What's important on this, and what you'll hear me talk about in a lot of these mentor minute sessions, is what is the smallest action can you take that is going to help you move forward and create some momentum. So this is brought up in the book. When you see that you can find and enjoy new cheese, you change course. When you see the benefits of your actions, it's easier to make that full course correction. It's easier to invest in new changes, new things. So what I recommend is start small. Whatever it is that you need to change, like I say, start with the oldest policy that you have in the entire building and see what you can do to change it and make it better. Change out the printer. Everybody probably wants a brand new printer that's quicker and doesn't break down as much. Change that out. Find the small change that creates momentum, because that's what you can start tying to in your mind and say, you know what? Change isn't bad. Change is something that can lead to good. That's one of the big paradigm shifts that you want to make. One of the easiest ways to do that is simply starting small. Or it may be that you need to make a big, huge change in what you're doing. But what is the smallest thing that you can start doing right now to start leading into that change? Oftentimes we know what the simplest, smallest step is to start off with. It's steps 10, 12, 20, and 100 that we're not sure of. Those will go ahead and expose themselves in a certain time frame. You can get started now. Start building that momentum and tying things together. And that gets into, I led right into it. Noticing small changes early helps you adapt to the bigger changes that are to come. And that gets into it. If you're keeping track of the metrics, if you're looking at things that are changing, it's easier to make those small course corrections early than it is to make those big course corrections later. But it also leads in, even if you have to make that big course correction, you're aware of it, you've already started making changes in that regard, and it makes it easier to kind of change the way that you do things. So getting through actually kind of to the end of the book, and I'm going to go ahead and summarize it. Hey, this is not going to be that hour and a half long, almost 2-hour discussion on a book. Small book here, and very simple and powerful message to it. So at the end of the book, Sniff and Scurry find this huge, it's Cheese Station N, probably for new cheese. That's my guess, is why it was named Cheese Station N. They find this new cheese station that has even more cheese than the original one, new kinds of cheese that are different. So the mice are sitting there chilling, they're fat. Ha has been looking for ages, and Ha has gone through the process of wanting to give up and pushed through that. Found ways to get through, tried to bring him along with him, finally gets through to Cheese Station N and learns his lessons from this whole process on persevering and how to go through change, and all of that is enjoying the new cheese. And it kind of sums up on page 74 in my copy. It's called The Handwriting on the Wall, because he's writing these little lessons on the wall as he's going through the maze, as he kind of comes up with these realizations. The first one is that change happens. You need to keep moving, or they keep moving the cheese. Life happens. Change is a part of that. The cheese, as they say, is moving. What you value today isn't going to be able to be addressed in the same way that you address it right now, 1 year from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now. Things change, and you need to be acknowledging that fact. That helps you make those changes when they need to come. We probably don't make them as quick as we want to, generally, because of all of those different reasons. But change happens, and quite frankly, change needs to happen. Otherwise, things atrophy and things begin to decay. Second thing is to anticipate change. Get ready for the cheese to move. What are the things that affect what matters most to you as far as money is concerned, career, family, accomplishment, whatever it is that's important, whatever your cheese is, what is it that affects that? And then what you do is you look at what affects those things. And when you are dialed into a couple of layers of that, so what's important to you, what affects what's important to you, and what affects that. So you got those 3 layers. When you're keeping tabs on those things, you will start seeing things change. And you can make moves that help you move on to different environments. One of the ways that I progressed in organizations, or throughout organizations and switched organizations, was I was really good at seeing when a department that I was in was going to start plateauing. And so they weren't on this big growth trajectory anymore, but there was going to be a plateau. I consolidated a ton of call centers for a Fortune 500 company. At the point that we had consolidated all of the call centers, you knew that you had moved into a different stage of the business. And that's when I looked to move on. That was going to deal with my cheese of career progression, but also learning new things and developing. I wasn't going to develop during that plateau nearly as much. So you keep an eye on those things, and that is indicative of when you are going to need to change and gives you that signal. Third thing is monitor change. Smell the cheese often so you know when it is getting old. Kind of the story that I just went through. Step 4 of 7 is adapt to change quickly. The quicker you let go of the old cheese, the sooner you can enjoy the new cheese. I see people sticking in jobs for a year longer than they need to. They know darn good and well they have sniffed that cheese in that old job, and they know that it's going old. But they are hoping that something changes, something that is out of their control, something that they can't do that makes that old job better. And that's what I've seen over and over and over again. And what always happens, and I really actually almost want to say always happens, it never flips around to where the job all of a sudden magically, instead of going on a downtrend of being boring and unfulfilling, rarely does it ever turn around. I want to say it always comes to a point 6, 9, 12 months, 18 months down the line where they realize, you know what, no, I do need to leave this position. And they wasted, for lack of a better term, all of that time. They had monitored that change. The quicker you're able to let go of the old, the quicker you're able to move on to the new. And getting back into this, it was one of my takeaways from it this time, is that visualization process of what it can be at a new job, in a new position, trying a new thing in your work. What can it be like to move into those positions and change? And what's happened is when they do get that new job, the excitement that they feel, the fulfillment that they feel is absolutely amazing. And it just is a huge paradigm shift for them. And I always try to tell them, remember these moments, because you're going to be tested like this again in your career at some point, and realize that this is what's waiting on the other side of that change when you make it thoughtfully and in the right way. So, change, the number 5 is actually just calling it out, all right? When you've monitored it, you've anticipated it, when you've realized it's going to happen, when you've ready to adapt, then make the change, make the move. The other thing is, a lot of people decide that they want a new position. They decide that they want to change. They want to institute a new system, a new policy, whatever it is, but they delay. They wait. When you've gone through the steps, when you've monitored things, when you understand how things are going to play out, then make the move, take the action. And if you struggle with that, going back to what I said before, if you struggle with that, look at the smallest change that you can make. Make the simplest step in the right direction. What is that? It can be calling a meeting. It can be pulling a report. It can be making a call to the salesperson for the system that you're looking to put in place to have them come in and demo it. All of those things, very simple steps, very obvious steps, and that gets things rolling and gets that change in place. All right. 6th one is to enjoy the change. And this is one that gets overlooked. All right. Having the excitement. All right. And I'll say that uncertainty, that nervousness adds a little bit of spice to the job. Enjoy that. In the story, Ha learned to enjoy running through the maze every morning. Once he found Cheese Station N, he learned his lesson. He kept monitoring it every morning to see where the cheese levels were at. He explored the maze, continued exploring the maze so that he knew where to go and where not to go once the cheese was gone. He learned to enjoy those runs through the maze. He looked to enjoy that process and realized that that process led to more security and more happiness, and that led to that enjoyment. But going through and making improvements, that's your role as a leader. Bringing change to organizations is your role. The status quo isn't your role. Making improvements is your role. And to improve anything, you're going to need to change it. Now, what happens is you need to take a larger view, is what I tell people. It isn't just that you tried this one change and it failed. It's that you tried 5 changes and 3 of them were successful and 2 of them failed. It's a longer term perspective. You're going to have that 2 steps forward, 1 step back. Be ready for that 1 step back and keep looking, keep searching. All right. The last one is be ready to change quickly and enjoy it again and again. So it carries on and it keeps going because we're going to be changing more and more. And it is what I call the change muscle. All right, getting your team used to change. Lots of small changes are good. They are healthy. They keep people in practice. They're like going to, it's the change gym, to draw another analogy. You know, you're doing those little workouts every day that kind of keep those muscles going and make you healthier and make you ready for the bigger things that come on board. So important. I did want to get to a couple of the comments here. I was given this book by my last manager, and will pass it on to others. Yes, passing the knowledge forward will create momentum. Every little change helps us positively because we are in a scurry mindset. Even if good ideas fail, people are still trying to move, which isn't a fail. People are learning, developing, and there's progress. And that's just it. You know, if you're not successful, if you have a failure, you at least learn from something. You know, drawing going back to the story of the maze and looking for cheese, you will try something and you will find that it is a dead end in your particular maze as you're going through life. Fine, you know not to go down there. That is one less option that you have to worry about taking again. So you learn to try something else. Maybe that's a dead end. Or maybe the next one that you take leads to a cheese station that has no cheese. You learn from that. Maybe that's you moving to a different job and finding it was the wrong job to move into. You learn to ask better questions next time, to look for some of those warning signs. You gain that knowledge and experience, and that's what helps you change down the road. All right? And that's you know, Jackie kind of hits on it. Monitor for that change. There is changes that are coming constantly. So the only way to do it is monitor them and be ready for it. It's easier to adapt to something quickly when it is a small change than when you've let it go along and it becomes a larger and larger change. All right? So, Who Moved My Cheese? Absolutely fantastic book. If you haven't picked it up, do it. Pick it up. It takes an hour and a half to read and is great from a personal and professional standpoint. And try to roll it out to your teams. Maybe get a couple of copies and start rolling your team through it. It's a good exercise for everybody to go to because every single person in the organization is going to have to adapt to change. And this is a book that helps everybody adapt to change. So pick it up. Hope you enjoy it. And as always, if you have any questions on it, you can always ping me, cm@CameronMorsey.com, direct message me on Facebook, or pick it up during one of my Mentor Minute sessions, and I'll be happy to talk about this or change, which is one of those topics that we talk about regularly on those podcasts. Thanks so much, everybody, and I will talk to you later. Bye-bye.